Thanks for clicking on Conversations with Crosswinds Counseling. I'm Curtis Smith, and I invite you to subscribe to our podcast and to like and share it as well. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Conversations with Crosswinds Counseling. I'm Curtis Smith, your host, and joining me today is one of the newest counselors at Crosswinds Counseling, Destina Easley. Destina, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
This is National Suicide Prevention Week, and so we want to focus in on that topic, a topic that has had an interesting arc to it. Suicide has been a big problem in the United States, worldwide, for many years, but I think in the last few years it's become something that we're more aware of, that we talk about more. We have now this National Suicide Prevention Week to focus a light on it. Destina, I'm not even sure what the first right question is. It's such a big topic. Tell me what you have seen in terms of suicide and the impact that it has on the people who are left behind.
So I have seen a huge impact, and I'm thinking about the trainings that I've been in and just this idea of how over the years suicide has increased nationwide and even across all of the other countries. And it's so important to talk about because a lot of people are struggling. And so identifying what can we do for these people who are in need or who have lost a loved one. And so with that, it's just support. I mean, friends, family, just reaching out for support and getting you into a space where you're able to talk about it.
I think I recently saw a number that it was something like 48 or 49,000 people die by suicide in the United States every year. And that stat came with this caveat of that's what we know about, that suicide has always been underreported. So you think about every year, 50,000 or more people dying by suicide. It's a massive problem. How do we start to have more of those conversations to do the actual work of prevention? So I think we can talk about how do we help people who are dealing with having lost a loved one or a friend because of suicide, but it is National Suicide Prevention Week. How can we help those people who are hurting, who are struggling, so that we do prevent suicide before they get to that point? What are some of the keys for those of us who aren't counselors in our lives to walk around and be aware of it and to help people? What can we do?
Yeah. So when I think of suicide prevention, I think of the steps that we take to ensure that there is a plan in place for if taking your own life does enter your mindset. And that would be just identifying what protective strategies work for each individual. And so some people, you'll find that if they're struggling, they will really isolate or they'll engage in like high-risk behaviors. And that could be just using like alcohol or drugs or self-harm as a way to escape with that struggle or just manage through. And so there are a variety of different things that we can look out for. If someone's talking about their struggle, if they're giving away their possessions, if they are even implying that they are thinking of death or dying, to be able to talk about it and just open up that space so we can get them some help or just to keep them safe for now.
In your work as a counselor, do you often see it come through those kind of veiled signs? I mean, I assume that most people don't regularly come out and say, hey, I'm contemplating taking my own life. I'm things are that bad. Is it usually more through the veiled signs, and how do you start to read those well?
I know that there are some fears that people have with just sharing that suicide is on their mind, that they are thinking of it, because it can be scary to talk about. And then there are some things that could come up where it could just feel like they're opening up in a space where they just aren't sure where this is going to go. And people that I have seen, they typically mention just feeling like this hopelessness or just feeling like a burden, and that things would just be better off if they weren't here. And so just having this this dark space that they're at mentally, I think that is an indicator for me that it would be important to talk about it. Even if I'm just asking them, are you thinking of suicide? And if you are, let's talk about it.
Yeah. So from a counseling perspective, then, when someone says that kind of thing, how do you dive into that? What roads do you try to take them down that are different than, I want to take my own life?
Yeah. So the key is understanding if they are just passively thinking about it or actively thinking about it. So if they have this idea where just things would be better off if they weren't here, or that would be more of like passive. If it's active, like I'm going to leave and I'm going to do this, kind of just identifying where they are in that space and then planning ahead. So if it's passive, it would be really important in that moment to create a safety plan. Even if it's active, safety plan as well. I mean, just coming forward and talking about it is an indicator that they are safe. Yeah.
What about those left behind? That I mentioned them a minute ago. That if you've lost a friend or a family member or a loved one to suicide, that is obviously very traumatic and can be hard to deal with and cope with moving forward. When you work with people who've been impacted by suicide closely in their lives, how do you come alongside those people and get them to a healthier place?
Yeah, so there was a time when I was an intern for the local outreach to suicide survivors, and that is post-vention. So working alongside people who have lost a loved one. And that is just understanding what their needs are at the time. Would it be beneficial for them to engage in a support group or to just come to individual counseling and work through the grief and the loss that they are experiencing? It depends on each person on what their needs are and what they want for their journey ahead. And it's different for everyone, but mainly just being there for them in that space and allowing them to talk about it.
Do you find with most people there is this progression almost to suicidal thoughts, or is it a first instinct go-to for some people? Well, I'm just wondering again, as a non-counselor, do people have a hard time and instantly think? Do they jump right to, boy, this would just be so much easier if I just took my own life, and I don't know if I should be here, and things might be better if I weren't here, and all of that? Or is it a progression where you can see someone dealing with sadness and grief and loss and trial and tribulation that comes with life? We all go through that, and they make their way to the suicidal thoughts?
So what I have seen in my experience is that there's typically more than one thing that happens in their life that brings them into this state where it is just a dark mindset. They might feel that what has happened, maybe nobody understands or nobody cares, and that what they're experiencing, that they will experience it for the rest of their life. And a major thing that I like to add is that everything that we experience is temporary, and life changes, we change. So to be able to experience something so dark and to come out of that and look back and think, I was going through such a terrible time, but I had this support along the way. So there's typically more than one thing that leads into that mindset.
Yeah.
I
guess in my mind too, I kind of characterize it as one of two things. One would be something so awful has happened, so much pain, so much trauma, I just need to leave. The other would be, I'm not helpful to other people, I'm hurting other situations in my life. One of my favorite movies is It's a Wonderful Life, and that's kind of George Bailey's story. He just thinks, well, maybe this world would be better if I'd never been born. Is that fair to think about people who get to the point of suicide as falling into one of those two camps? Either this is so much pain, I've got to get out of here, or I'm not doing the world any good. The world would be better without me.
Mm-hmm. I believe so.
Okay.
From the experience that I have in the trainings and just sitting one-on-one with people who have experienced suicidal ideation, it does seem like those are the two. Yeah.
Is one more prevalent than the other? I wonder if in our world today, if one of those represents 70, 80, 90% of people who commit suicide. I don't know if you know. I am curious.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's such a sad path because it's not the best solution, obviously for the person, but for so many people. I think that's something that a lot of people who commit suicide or think about suicide, I think that's something they maybe don't realize is their impact on the world and how many lives are going to be touched by the loss of their life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It might be something that they are struggling with. I mean, that could be the reason why they are staying around. I have some trainings that have gone over suicide prevention and intervention, and just learning about someone's story and finding that turning point, like why they have stayed so long, how they've managed through, and what do they want for their lives, just to keep them safe, especially for now. Yeah.
Well, if you are watching this podcast and you are considering suicide, we certainly do not want that for you, and we would encourage you to reach out to Crosswinds Counseling. You can do that at crosswindscounseling.org. Perhaps you're watching this podcast and you know someone who has died by suicide, and you are still dealing with that grief and that sadness and that loss. You can find help too at crosswindscounseling.org. We have wonderful counselors like Destina here who can help you work through all of those things. We would love to be a small part of seeing suicide numbers start to go down, because they have been going up across the United States, and we would love to see that trend reversed. We hope there's never another suicide. And here on National Suicide Prevention Week, we thought it was a great time to talk about this. So, Destina, thank you so much for talking about a topic that is hard to talk about and a lot of people struggle with. And thanks for joining us on the podcast today.
Of course, thank you.
And thank you for joining us on the podcast. We'll see you next time on Conversations with Crosswinds Counseling. Thanks again for watching this special episode of Conversations with Crosswinds Counseling. If you or a loved one are experiencing a mental health emergency, including self-harm thoughts or suicide, please contact 988 or get to the nearest emergency room. If you're not in an emergency situation but need to talk through some of those things, Crosswinds Counseling is here to help you. Go to crosswindscounseling.org to find a counselor near you.